Okay. Techniques. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first MCA Inspiration event. We're going to talk about people transport on the River Scheldt. We're going to do that in style presentations, study of 5 years. No, that's not the issue. The reason why we are here is to stir things up. Quite some time people have come to us, MCA in general, to say, okay, what can we do more with people transport next to or linked to water buses on the River Scheldt grid? Sometimes we said, yeah, there should be done more, there could be done more, but what are things, the boundaries? What are the things that hinder us? What does prevent us from going further than where we are today? And where are we today? Because what can we do? What's technology? What's the status? What kind of pickup places do we have? A lot of things that are unknown. Well, over the last few years, 1.5 years approximately, myself and Deepak Mehta, our communication manager of MCA, community manager of MCA, have been talking to a lot of people. People have been talking to us. And we have found a few people also that have been studying and getting into some of the details, some of the things that might do good for the idea of making more people transport available. But first, for those of you at home or at work online, we are recording this. So if you don't want to turn up in some video, put up your own video and maybe also put off your noise and voice so that it won't be recorded for that purpose. We have 4 themes for things that we want to present to you. I will go first through some of the things that we encountered along the last the period of 1.5 years that we went through. Who we spoke to, what did we find out, where are the hurdles, and who is enthusiastic about doing stuff in this area. Because it's not only we don't want to do this, we cannot do this. I hear a lot of why aren't we doing this? How can we do this? So I will take you there and do a little journey there. After that, we go to the University of Antwerp, where we found a team under Professor Vanelslander that was very willing to study more on people transport. They're going to give their findings briefly to us. Then we also have Stijn Bosmans of the Vlaamse Waterweg, who just serves you to the possible pickup places that they have defined and what are the positive or the negative side, and a very high level general terms that they have found. And we're talking about more than 70 potential spots that have been identified. So that's quite a lot more than I think you and I could have imagined a few months ago. And then Tom Gerets from MBK will give some insights on how they stand in all of this. Well, if we talk from MCA, we all talk about challenges. Challenges that supersede the capabilities of each individual person or organization in our community. I think this is a good example that if, for instance, the government says we want to have water taxis, that they still would need other parties, other people, private sector that reacts to that question and says, okay, this is what we're going to offer. So it's always something that supersedes the things, and you need scale, scope, you need interaction between people before you can really make this work. Otherwise, it becomes or either a fully government-owned initiatives, and it most of the time costs money, and then it always the question, is it from an innovation or technological or commercial point of view, is this the best way to go or not? So our challenge is, how do we transport more people over the water? We have the biggest highway here behind you all. The biggest highway in Antwerp is right behind us. And we only see the water bus, which is a good instrument, which is a good thing. We see a lot of professional transport, but we don't see that many people going over the river, except for some XO boating or the water limo that we see passing by here and there. Why would we do that? Well, there are a lot of people working next to the river. A lot of people need to commute to Antwerp, from Antwerp, the surroundings. So why not? And with the congestion that we might have over the next few years and maybe decades with the Oosterweel, it might seem logical also to think about just taking a few % of all those people in their cars and transferring them to water or whatever. So that's the general idea. And how do we persuade those people of using the water? What can you expect today? We're not going to bring you all the solutions. We're just going to say, this is what we know today. This is the challenge that we have. These are the stakeholders that involve. This is the enthusiasm that we see. Okay, how can we proceed? Who's going to be in our coalition of the willing to work on this? Either on the public side, on the private side. We will see how that goes about. We're not going to present you, say, this is what we should do, government do A, city do B, and private sector do C. That's not the idea. This is something that we call co-creation, and that's what we want to encourage. Don't want to go into too much detail here. Why the River Scheldt? Well, it's near our door of MCA, and it's something where we lack this kind of services. It has some challenges. We know that the tides can go up to 5 meters in height. That's different from other rivers, for instance, from other cities. The current can go up to 6 kilometers an hour. We have quite some natural quay compared, for instance, to Rotterdam, where some natural banks instead of quays. Where in Rotterdam you have more quays, it's easier to tack something on there. So that makes it a very challenging thing. The other way, what do we have already? We have the water bus. This is an initiative, I think, where the contracts will be reviewed over the next few years. We have the ferry services, several parts of the river. We have Flandria, we have water limo, and we have professional transport also over the river. The infrastructure that is now in place and can be used, then I think about the pickup places of the water bus. I think about the Royal Yachting Club infrastructure, and there are a few people that have their own private or open or semi-open infrastructure that's available. On sustainability, because how is this going to evolve? Are we going to keep on using the same technology as now? Are we going to go to hydrogen, electrification? This is methanol, ethanol. What will be the thing, and how we're going to refuel, for instance, those vessels that we're going to have? What's the status there? Well, I think there are some initiatives on the ferry, and we have some electrification with limited solar. There's also a full electric vessel announced for the end of 2022. And there are also professional vessels, for instance, Port of Antwerp, on methanol and on hydrogen. So there is some technology available. Is it all applied to, for instance, water bus? No, not yet, because that wasn't in the contract. And the technology wasn't available at the time that the contract was signed. That's the as is. Why are we talking about it now? Well, we could have talked about it a year and a half ago, because some people mentioned to us, yeah, can't we do something? Yeah, we can do something, but first you need to also evaluate what's the status. Where are we? What could we do? And what would we do? Well, there's some kind of momentum growing, and we feel that in the feedback that we get from people, MDK will later explain, the policy around public transport is getting more and more shaped. Some agreements within the administration are there, or some decrees that are being balanced. There's also a request for information for the follow-up of the water bus contract. It's a general questionnaire, but some policy change might arise from that. We have the ferry service contracts that might come open over the next few years, and what will happen to them, those who are done by also private parties. You have the Oosterweel construction works, where the question is, what about water mobility? What about more people on the river to bring that extra percentage of a few percent of people that use less of the road? And then we have other opportunities, maybe Havenbeleving Center that's going to be built over the next few years, MCA campus, our own campus, that's all doing with water, attracting students, pupils. What can we do with that? Is there something that they can have some experience over the water? And then you have a lot of technology going on. CFAR, for instance, situated here in the building. You have Zulu, all both working on autonomous shipping or assistant or semi-assisted shipping. You also have Transx, you have XO boating, you have sea bubbles, you have different technologies. Not saying that all of these technologies can be implemented or transferred towards people transport, but we are not far from that. And let's say 5 years ago, none of these technologies existed. Now they do. What can we do with it? For instance, in cost reduction, in safety things, and so on. There are also things that say, okay, talk about people transport, but how can we link, for instance, professional people transport? The pilots, for instance, is there some exchange possible? And boats are situated all over the port. Is there an advantage of people linking them, vessels to people? What's the trajectory that they have to go to? Also, parcel delivery, DHL, Amazon are coming to Blue Gate. Is there an advantage that all those people in the morning with their electric bikes start driving from the south all the way to the north? Or can we, for instance, already transport some of those parcels over the water to the north, that people just start from there? Question mark. Not sure how the business model is, but there might be some positive things there. What we experience, and that's personal opinion, there is room for maneuvering. There is room for opening up. There is room to do some stuff. And if we're going to maneuver somewhere, we need to know that quite a bit of things are interlinked. Like I said, if we just say change policy, that doesn't mean that technology is adapted to that policy, and vice versa. If we want to go for autonomous, and the policy, the Flemish government only foresees, for instance, that assistant shipping is possible, well, there's a difference, not only in technology, but also in cost reduction that can be achieved, and in many more things that are needed, for instance, in networks, in et cetera, et cetera. So we need to make sure that everything is interlinked to move on. If we just say, okay, put 5 boats on the water in with classic engines, and we're not going to change anything about the business model or whatever that's there, we're going to be faced with high rates, questions about safety and security, and for instance, also sustainability towards the future. Are you going to, or is it possible to dock with a simple small vessel on every platform or pickup possibility of the water bus, for instance? No, it's not feasible. It's not allowed, not even in some circumstances. So both the pickup spots, where are they? What are they? What's the infrastructure that's available there? Not only from a technical point of view, but also from the user experience. What do we need to convince people to go over there? Also the vessels, what's the evolution? Are we going to say you only can sail now semi-automatic vessels and they should go on methanol? It's pretty limited. But if you put it in a concession, for instance, yeah, it will remain that way for the next 5 to 7 years. You get a technology lock-in. If you're going to open it up, you need another framework that assures you safety, security, flexibility, adaptability. So you need a lot of more of those things. The framework is important and should take into account all the technological evolution and the infrastructure that's there. And then demand. If we were to say, What are we going to do? Let's do a study and see what the demand is. People will probably say, I don't know. Why should I take some taxi? I'm not sure how long it takes. I'm not sure what the comfort level is. People don't know it. So if you're just going to study it, probably we will get the answer, I don't know. If you can go towards the demand where you make sure that big corporations, institutions are activated to use that and go for pilots, for instance, that's another way of working. I'm not saying that that's the only way that's possible, but it's a different way of looking at things on how we're going to do that. And then the linked is what I said, is the parcel delivery and professional. Few things I already mentioned. One thing is, how many pickup places do we have? Where can we pick up people and what's possible from this network? Well, we get all that information later on, so I won't get into that now. But it also could mean that if we have more pickup places, that we get other business models. Should we have some parts of the river point-to-point ferries just crossing? Or if we have more pickup places, should there be something that's more mixed, more multi-connected, multi-to-multi, question mark? That might be something that could appear from the studies that have been done. And we're going to go into that a little later. The bigger text that's there is just a suggestion of things that we need to talk about in the future without going into that in much detail right now. The infrastructure, I talked about a few of those things already. The infrastructure should be right for the users, not only for the people sailing the ships. And does it need to cost that much more? Well, I think about, for instance, the water bus stop in Kruijbeke. Maybe it's possible to just simply prolong it and use the same infrastructure, parking facilities, and just put an extra vessel or whatever next to it, so that you can use the same infrastructure with minimal cost, and that you have more capability or capacity to have people come there. Is that a good answer? Not sure. But I think we need to also not only look at, yeah, we need a pickup spot there. We need to buy everything new or start everything from scratch. A lot of things are there already. We just need to make sure that they are at the right level and see what incremental investments we should do there. Access to the spots. Is it with, I have a QR code, I put it in front of a reader and I can access it even if it is a private facility that I'm entering? Or should we make sure that all the infrastructure is open? But also discussions that need to take place with the owners of the facility, both public and private. And that we also need to take into account from a user point of view, what's the user experience that you create with 2 weeks up. Other things like charging facilities or refueling facilities, if you choose to go to sustainable, more sustainable engines, more sustainable vessel, what's available, what's possible. Yeah, we know that there's a hydrogen refueling station. We built it, so we know it. But there is electrification. Well, they're working on plug for the cruises, so there's also possibility of recharging possibly. How can we cooperate on that? There are things that we also need to make sure, how far is the step that we're going to set? Is this just incremental from sustainability point, or are going to go all the way? But what technology will prevail for this kind of vessel? And another important one, I think that's for both the Flemish region and for the city. It's not that if you have a pickup point and people come up there and say, we're in the middle of nowhere, oh, we're happy. No, you need to be able to go somewhere. You need to be able to park your car. You need to be able to take a fellow. You need to be able to take some kind of sharing or whatever possibility. Public transport, it needs to be interlinked with each other. If not, if you have to go 500, 600, 700 meters after you leave the water bus off or something else, it simply doesn't work because people lose time in that. The vessel, I already pointed out a few of those things on sustainability. way to go there can be by just testing it, pilots, or by saying we decide it, and that probably be a government that decides it. We're more the guys that want to do stuff, and I think more of the private people here in the house want to do stuff, but then we need to make sure that everyone agrees that that's the right thing, the right way to do stuff. And then another very important one is how confident do we feel in the next 3 to 5 years with unmanned autonomous shipping? That's a game changer when it comes down to cost, not the investment cost, but more the running cost of this system. It can be done, probably. Technology is there. But is that also something that you convey towards users and that they feel well, good, affordable, that they want to go there? Skip to the demand. I think that from the demand side, we last 1.5 years, we struggled a little bit. What are we going to do? Are we going to take the lead and contact everyone from Unicor, smulders over Tuna Sea and say, okay, let's all sit together and try to put a figure on the demand? Or do we need to persuade people and say, this is what we want to do? And then afterwards, and take some pilots and go over and see how demand evolves and react to that. We have chosen the latter because there are a lot of things that need to be decided. If we go over and to say to, for instance, Unicor, say, this is what we offer. This is what we see as a future. And 3 weeks later or something, this government says, no, we're not, we do not concur, we do not feel that technology is already there. So we don't allow that technology, then your chicken and egg is becoming a problem. I think we saw this, all the people that are sitting here are confronted with a complex situation as it is. If you confront the final customer with that at this point, it will be too complex for them to answer. So we need to go from what can we do from a technology, from an operations point of view, how can all people work and interact and go from there on. And then we come to the framework also. Framework is what can we do? How do we push the connectivity? Is that with an app? Is it with Uber, like they're doing in London apparently? Can we link it to Snel naar Antwerpen? Is it for reservations? Is it mutually shared by all providers? Is it each and every provider who has to do that for themselves? What do we do with that? How is policy going to evolve? And linked to that, how are budgets going to evolve? What's the water bus? What's the next step? Water bus 2.0, I would say. And what are the financial consequences from the water bus, and how can we distribute it or work with these budgets, for instance, also next to the legislation that can be there, and what can be done with that? Not only is this in investments, but also in operational budgets. If you take it from private side, infrastructure needs to be there. You have to be able to get on and off. On technological point of view, I think there can be a level playing field if you set the same safety and security and sustainability standards. But what with operation costs? If you decide that 2 crew members have to be on board of a vessel at all times, then you increase the operational cost quite a bit. Yes, you're putting that solution out of the market, more or less. Or you making it very exclusive so that it's only for a very narrow customer base that can be used. So that are the things that we need to balance, and that we have to see how technology kicks in there. And I'm getting back to one of the main issues. This is going to be less manned, unmanned, autonomous. That will be, I think, game changer. I'm not going to go into all those details because others have done it before. Question is also, are we going to do the same as others? Or are we going to take a jump and try to get ahead of others? And what is possible on technology-wise? We also asked a question to people of the University of Namur. There were marketing students, so not nautical or maritime people. And we have asked them what is the customer experience, what to say. They come up with apps, which is pretty evident, I would say, but they have thought about through and what should they do, what should they connect, as not being in the maritime, not thinking from out of the water, but thinking from a customer point of view. So we had two teams thinking about it. One talked to sea bubbles, the guys who have those little bubbles on fins and sail, not commercially, as I understand correct. They talked to, is that technology viable? Yes or no? What are the consequences, the positive and the negative? Well, this is this information next to all the other that's available that we can work with. Their conclusions, we can do something with that, because if no one looks at it, then you don't know anything. These logos haven't been cleared for putting on this slide. Why are they there? Just to make sure that these are a few and not even all commercial and not even all private people, parties, institutions, governments, corporates that should be somewhere at least heard, linked, thought of when going through the process of saying, what are we going to do in the next evolution? A lot of people won't see their logo on there. That's not because we have forgotten them, Ego, for instance. But it's simply that this is a complex matter. This is not a one-person job. This is not something that someone's going to go to the ivory tower and sit there and say, I'm going to draft a two-pager, and in the end, everything is okay. We need to link people. We need to link people with each other, and we need to do that in a structural way, not putting all those people together, because you get a hell of a networking facility. That's what we will do after this this session. But we won't continue. So we propose to do that in more streamlined workshops, steering committees, whatever that we find necessary. But before we can do that, we need to know who's part of a coalition of the willing, who wants to cooperate on that. On a public and a private side, we are a not-for-profit organization, yeah, so we can talk to everyone. But that's also I think the thing that we need to make sure that the right people sit on the right table, not to just get to know things of each other and not share. If you will sit on our table, you have to share. You have to be open up and say, okay, in the end, we all need to make our own decisions, but we have to take informed decisions rather than just decisions that we with the information available. And that's what we want to trigger with this session, and then continue in sessions later on. So afterwards, feel free to reach out and to come to us, and then just say, okay, I want to be involved in this and this and this part, or in the general part, or whatever. And we'll see that we put people on the right table. And if everything works well, our job is over. And in 2 or 3 years, we have a lot of things that happen on the river. And because the River Scheldt is that difficult in environment, you just say it like Frank Sinatra said, if we can make it there, we can make it everywhere. Now go to a little more study. Professor Thierry Vanelslander and team of students you all see, and we're very happy that we can all have you here. We're going to go a little into their detail, but Thierry, I think you're going to do an introduction of that.
Okay. Thank you, Bart. Sure. So, very glad to be here, and thank you to all for being here in this session and being willing to listen also to what we're going to say. But I'm only the pre-program of, well, let's say the main part of this session that will be, on our side at least, our 3 students. Well, they were students, now they are all working, they are alumni, I should say now, who have gone a bit deeper into looking into these maritime transport solutions and into water taxis in particular. So they're going to tell a lot more about that. I'm going to give some brief intro. I'm glad that Bart gave me some 20 minutes to dry up a bit because I came here with the bike through the city center. And as you can imagine, the weather isn't that excellent. So that shows already one of the drawbacks of some of the alternative modes of transportation. I wish I had a car at that moment. At other moments, I don't wish, but anyway, we're there, so that's fine. So I'm going to talk a bit about more general what's coming up in the future, because we can develop lots of solutions, but of course we should know what's developing, what do figures show, what do statistics show, and what do we expect for the future also, if we look at mobility. And apologize for the picture, it's not about water, but that also shows, of course, already that many of these modes, which are today still a lot used, are not waterbound solutions. Yeah, we are still stuck with cars to a high extent. Luckily, we see more and more bikes coming up, and I hope, of course, we see these water solutions also coming up. Now, from all the research we have done, I took together a bit a number of factors, and Bart already talked. We have to convince people to use these alternative modes of transport. How do you do that? Can you just transfer any solution that exists anywhere? You've seen the picture with Rotterdam and other places where things are happening already. Well, the answer is no, because there's a lot of locally bound issues that have to be taken into account. I will not explain that in full detail everything, but just show the main categories. It's about market potential. It's about people. Yeah, what factors, what decision factors do people find important? It's about the urban environment. Yeah, if you have a very hilly city, for instance, yeah, by definition, biking will be more complicated, or it will be more complicated to convince people to take the bike than in a flat city like Antwerp, for instance. The available transport system, we can talk about water taxis, water buses, other solutions. Of course, these are not living on islands. Yeah? They are competing with other modes of transport, which are there already. Also that we have to take into account. National policies, and in Belgium, national is quite complicated because we have national, regional, and even lower levels of decision-making that have a say on this. All this, of course, also influences the way in which people are incentivized or are not incentivized to use certain modes of transport. Yeah? Just think about our famous company car. Well, in fact, it's not company car policy, but we call it salary car policy because it replaces part of the salary that people can get. Of course, that does not invite many people to change mode of transport. You should be stupid if you get a salary car with a refueling card. Why would you then take a bike, or why would you take a water taxi or one of these other solutions? So all this has to be considered also. Urban policies, that's one of these layers of decision making, of course, but it also involves parking regulations. If in a city like Antwerp, you allow people to park nearly for free. Yeah? If we compare with Dutch prices, for instance, if you go to Amsterdam, you want to park your car for a day, you will know what to pay. In Antwerp, these amounts are really modest. That also does not always give the right incentives to change to other modes of transport. Yeah? And there's other elements there, taxation policies, etc. I will not go into too much depth there. And then, of course, yeah, that competition environment, yeah, competition, but also collaboration. Also, like Bart said, it's about integrating these modes of transport. It's not about the water taxi alone, but you have a pre and a post trajectory to make, preferably in dry conditions. People probably appreciate that also. These are all elements that play, of course, that play a role in convincing people, the demand side, but also on the supply side that will stimulate or not stimulate companies to come up with certain initiatives like water taxis, for instance. By the way, you can see that if you look at the market potential, there's really a lot of factors that you have to take into account. Yeah? Also, like Bart said, it's not about a standard solution. There is no standard person. Every person is different. And then you can further categorize them. And depending on the combination of characteristics, they will react differently to a certain solution like the water taxi. So again, you have to take that into account. By the way, there are good techniques. I know, Bart, that you mentioned that it's hard to ask people or to really make them tell what kind of choice they want to make. Well, there are good scientific techniques that can be used to really get behind those real drivers of choice making, and in which, in a kind of hidden way, we can, but that we can discuss maybe in at the reception or the network you have afterwards. So these are driving factors. On the other hand, I said there's also figures available, statistics available, and I don't want to overload you with too many figures. Yeah, I just took a table which is made actually by the Belgian Federal Planning Office, which is still the official office that does good statistics and also makes good forecasts. Yeah? And I want you to look a bit into this top part and look at this last column, which gives the expectations, the forecasts actually for 2040 as compared to, let's call it the current day situation, 2019. Of course, that was pre-COVID, but we assume that quite soon we will come back to, well, that situation more or less, with some exceptions, but I'll come back to that. So what do we see? If we look at the annual number of trips that people are making, that are being made, we see an increase, 7.6% increase compared to today. So that's still substantial. That means that there will be, in easy words, a lot more traffic still. Yeah. Let's look a bit here. That's the number of passenger kilometers. So that's the number of people traveling plus the distance that they are driving. And that's important because more people driving longer distances, of course, leads to many more problems, much more congestion, etc., than when people only drive short distances or travel short distances. If we look at the modes of transport there, well, the car is expected to go up by 5.6% in total volume of passenger kilometers. Yeah? Buses, trams, metro, 8.8% growth. And then the last one here, biking and walking is expected to go up very heavily. Yeah. So we see, and that's with the currently known measures. So the Federal Planning Office has taken into account decided policies, not what's in the air and what may be decided in the next years, but simply what has been decided today. If we take that into account, we expect especially biking and walking to grow very strongly. Of course, helped also by speed pedaling and electric bike solutions, helped by the fact that in COVID, people have discovered the bike also. So these are things that are taken into account. Mind you, of course, there are seasonal effects, which you don't see that much with the car. That's much more stable over the year. But you can imagine in these type of weather conditions, that the bike usage is decreasing, and that will be the case, I fear, for the next 6 months. And then we'll see it go up again as the summer and the sun are coming. So that's something to be taken into account. Also, if you invest into alternative modes of transport. The one losing a bit is the train, which was already happening and which is a trend that we see further coming up in the future. Also, the patterns, if we talk about which kind of people are traveling, are making trips, it's important to look at this. It will be a bit less of commuting. Yeah, that's one of the longer run COVID impacts. Yeah, people have discovered to work at home. Yeah, of course, the energy crisis may disrupt that a bit again, but the expectation is overall that there will be a decrease, and that, for instance, for study purposes, students going to universities, to schools, to high schools, etc., that one will be on the increase. So these are important things to know before you start investing, of course, and before you start designing certain solutions. Oops, the button is not reacting. I think something is wrong with the system. There, there it is. Okay, good. Just a bit summarized in scheme. So if we look at total demand for passenger, oh, that's a bit too quick now. Oops, yeah, there we are. Total demand for passenger transportation, 1 million passenger kilometers. So that one is increasing, but the increase is topping off. If we look at 2040, we see it's not increasing that much anymore. That means that people are more and more using home working, for instance, and applying other solutions, teleconferencing, these kind of things that we all learned to know maybe a bit too much during COVID, but will have a long-lasting trend impact also. And then the number of kilometers per person, that one is even going down a bit, as you can see. That means individually, we will travel less on an annual basis in 2040 than we do today. But of course, given the fact that population is still growing and more people will be traveling in total, the number of passenger kilometers will still be going up a bit. Again, it's important to differentiate to different needs. Why are people traveling? If we look at the total number of trips, then we see that, for instance, professional transportation is going down. Yeah, so that market, which typically is also the better paying part of the market. I mean, typically business people are willing to pay more than people with other purposes for transportation. That one is going down. We see that free time, so anything to do with shopping, for instance, or with just leisure transportation, that one is going up. And then the one for, as it's called, daily needs, the basic shopping, yeah, the basic things that people need, that one is going up further. So that again is an important one to know before you start making decisions. If we zoom again on the individual modes of transport, so like I indicated before, you've seen it in the figures also, biking and walking really is expected to have a strong increase. That is really being picked up also as a consequence of the COVID period. The other ones are a bit more on the stable side, as you can see. These were my intro slides as a kind of warm up for what's to be expected for the future. And now I have the pleasure to hand over to these three bright young men. They are still young. Now working, as I said, in different functions. Scheldt now working at the Port of Antwerp. Mohammed working in the liquid bulk sector. And then Naeem working with us, just started with us as a PhD researcher at our department. But they will talk here still as students, which they were until a few months ago. So in their roles, that means not linked to the companies where they are active today. And they will focus on the water taxi solution, which they have been investigating in a bit more depth as part of their master thesis at CMAT in the last year. So I gladly hand over the floor to these three bright young guys. There you go.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I don't need to repeat it. So I'll just put on the title. The title was to look into the strategy of how can we utilize people transportation on River Scheldt, and that is what me and my batchmates we studied. But I'll elaborate more. So it's just a basic outline. You have research questions, methodology, best practices from around the world, and then the interviews which we did with different stakeholders involved, and our proposals and recommendations. So the challenges which we got, it was basically a subject given by MCA to work on us, was to create an ecosystem. So the ecosystem wherein everybody works together and to see the possibility of creation of ecosystem. And then to identify the current stakeholders and the potential stakeholders, like Bart has already given you a variety of symbols on the screen. So you can see it's not an individualistic approach. It has to be a collaborative approach. So that's what we were looking into. And also the identification of synergies of available infrastructure and also the potential infrastructure which could be part of the solution. And of course, again, Bart has already mentioned it, it's the provision to test the solutions, possibly to get the approvals from the stakeholder or the general public in the city of Antwerp. So based on that, we defined 3 research questions to identify like what was the current infrastructure and who are the stakeholders in the present transportation. And then we also wanted to look into that what were the pain points, the concerns or the perspective of the current stakeholders, and what was holding behind the solution or what can propel the solution forward. And also in the end, a very summarized strategy, which was a result of our study, which my colleagues will again show the different parts of the study. Okay, so just a methodology, just to go quickly, the research questions, and what we did was a literature review and a little bit of field research. And that is very important. That's the criteria and analysis. We looked into the regulations, the capacity, cost, fuel, and of course, with the interviews, we were able to get certain data to support our strategy. Okay, now I'm going to give to my colleague. Okay.
Thank you, Naeem. In this part, in the best practices, we try to focus on the services that are being provided in different parts of the world, which can be a blueprint for our case in Antwerp. So as a result of our research, we found out that Dubai, Rotterdam, and Istanbul can be a good example for our case. So let's first start with Istanbul. In Istanbul, there are mainly 3 service providers, which are Turyol, Dentur, and Istanbul City Lines. Istanbul City Lines belongs to the state, Istanbul municipality, and the first 2 are privately owned companies. And what they are providing in the Bosphorus is that they are providing ferries, water bus, and water taxi services to all the people who are living and coming to Istanbul. So here it's a quick overview. On the left-hand side, we can see Turyol, Istanbul City Lines, and Dentur. These service providers are mainly focused on the ferries, like higher capacities rather than water taxis. So let's move on to water taxi in Istanbul. It's relatively smaller water taxis, ships, which our capacity is up to 10 people. And one boat master can or skipper can operate the whole small boat, and there's no requirement of the second people to sail or mooring or steering the boat. There are currently 50 water taxis in Istanbul, and 5 of them are running on electric, which proves that there's a strategic plan towards going environmentally free. And there are currently 98 piers, which provides a very extended traveling zone for both commuters, tourists, and all the people who are living in Istanbul. And the best sizes, it's available for 24/7. And in terms of the price, here it depends on the distance, as you can see. It's the first 5.5 euros, including the opening fee, and then the first mile that you travel. And then depending on how many miles that you are traveling, the costs will add up. And here's a quick overview how a water taxi looks like from both exterior and interior side. Here you can see that it can accommodate up to 10 people in a very comfortable way, and it's a view of the boat master or skipper who is steering the water taxi. And we can move on to Rotterdam. In Rotterdam, there are again different service providers, which are Blue Amigo, Water Taxi, and Splash Tours. They are again providing the water bus, water taxi services, plus Splash Tours is providing tourist really extended city tours on the Rotterdam waterways, not only specific destinations from point A to point B. And here's a quick overview of those boats, Splash Tour and water bus. In terms of the Rotterdam water taxi, it's pretty much similar to what we have seen in Istanbul. Capacity is highly smaller than big water buses. It's 12 people. Again, one boat master can really operate these water taxis. As we had a trip to Rotterdam with my colleagues a couple of months ago, we went to Rotterdam and took a trip with these water taxis, and I think we were around 10 people in one water taxi, right? And then it was one boat master who were really able to both mooring and steering, and in terms of everything, he was really comfortably maneuvering the water taxi. And there are currently 22 water taxis, and 6 of them running on clean energy. As far as I'm concerned, they are released hydrogen water taxis recently, and there are 50 piers where you can travel in between. And in terms of pricing, on the contrary of Istanbul, in Rotterdam, they are depending on the zones instead of the miles that you are traveling. If there are 3 main zones where you can travel, and depending on which zones you are traveling in between, these are the prices that people need to pay. And this is an example for water taxi, which we also had our trip around 45 minutes. And here's Dubai. In Dubai, on the contrary of Istanbul and Rotterdam, there are only one service provider, which is a part of government, Road and Transport Authority. They are fully owned and running all the operations for on the Dubai creeks. And in terms of the prices, they are services that they are providing: ferry, Abra, and water taxi. Let's have a look what they are look like. Here's the traditional Abras. These are running on combustion engine. These are again Abras, but they are relatively modernized, and they are running on electric. These are the water bus, and they have a capacity more than, I believe 50 people, right? More than 50, around 100. And for Dubai water taxi, and it's again smaller than water bus. It's again 10 people. One mode master. What we have seen in common in all those three cities is that one boat master can operate these smaller boats, and there are 44 piers where people can travel. But the downside of the Dubai water taxi is that the availability to the public, the service is being provided between 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And the prices are not strict. It depends on the travels that people are traveling. It's more like a taxi fare. It's, for example, how many did they calculate at the end of the travel, the distance that they have been made, and on average it costs between 14 and 53 euros. And also there's a second option where you can book the whole water taxi to yourself. If you are in a large group of friends or a large family, you can book the whole water taxi to yourself for 2 hours, which costs 103 euros. And this is how it looks like from both interior and exterior side. And as far as I'm concerned, it can really accommodate people up to 10 people. Now, what are the major takeaways from all those cities is that we have seen that there's a robust governance framework in all those business models. Although, for example, in Rotterdam, although there are different service providers, they are able to work within a framework where they are able to serve the water taxi and water bus systems to public. And it's running, it's the fact that they have problems, but in the end, they are able to provide those services. And in Dubai, there's only one provider, but we've seen that within that only one part, they are able to work in a way that they are providing those services to public. And in Istanbul, we have seen that there's a free market where private companies and public companies can enter as far as they are following some regulations of the government, which public can benefit from these positive competition. And as we have seen, although it's a small part right now, these clean energy engines on the water taxis, governments and countries are working towards these clean energies, and we are expecting to see more those in the future. So from now on, I will hand over the word to my colleague, who is going to talk about both of us in Hungary.
Thank you very much, Aki. Good afternoon, everybody. So now that we established the best practices around the world, as Aki briefly explained, we can compare these to the Antwerp case. The operational conditions of the water bus are as such that you need at least 2 people on board, or 2 persons on board, a skipper and a sailor. There's a capacity of up to 95 people. Some water buses can take bikes as well. Every 30 minutes at each terminus, water bus departs. So one from Lilo and one from Emixim. The demand for the service, there is demand for the service, sorry. There's also growing demand for the service, which we will show in the next slide. And the type of fuel is a diesel combustion engine. So if you compare this to what Akif just explained, 2 persons aboard, on board, sorry, in Dubai, Rotterdam, Istanbul, this was not the case. Same with the fuel type. There's a difference as we see that these cities are now focusing more on sustainable fuels. So here we see an overview of the demand for the water bus. This is a graph we received from the water bus itself. And actually, as of 2017, we can see a growing demand for the water bus services. As Professor Vanelslander also says, there's some seasonality. As we see here in July and August, we see an enormous spike. We assume that's because the weather is better. People prefer to take the water bus instead of taking the car. But that's just an assumption. And of course, we don't see that same spike in 2020 for obvious reasons. We were all locked up inside, so we weren't able to take the water bus. Of course, we're all talking about water transportation, but we have to be sure that this is the most efficient way or the energy efficient way of traveling. So therefore, these next slides, or next 2 slides, we found these during our literature review. And the first one talks about the distance traveled in kilometers, with 1 ton of freight, sorry, using the same amount of power. And as you can see, we mainly focus on road and water transportation as we are trying to convince people to take the boat instead of taking their own car. And we see that 1 ton of freight covers more distance or more kilometers than roads prefer. And actually, it's 3.7 times more than if it would be transported by the roads. So this already shows that water transportation is an efficient mode of transport, specifically for the distance covered. Of course, we are not focusing on freight, we are focusing on passengers. So therefore, this next slide, again, focus on passengers compared to maritime, but I see, okay, yeah. So as you can see, here we have the maritime passenger and here we have the car passenger. Maybe an example, I work at the Port Authority. I live 5 kilometers away from the Port Authority, so it takes me 5 kilometers from home to work and 5 back. If I were to take a maritime solution, I would emit around 305 grams of CO2 per kilometer. If I would do this with my own car, I would emit around 750 grams of CO2 per kilometer, which is an increase of 2.3 times the emissions if I were to take a maritime solution. Just to show that per passenger, it's also a much more sustainable mode of transportation. As Naeem already explained, we use the qualitative research, and some of the topics I will talk about, Bart touched upon in the introduction, but this will be more of a revision, so that's always interesting. So we talked to 6 stakeholders, and some of them were paired based on their part in the whole ecosystem. And these are these 6 stakeholders. I will start with, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in our interviews with the water bus and the water limo, we came across 4 major constraints. First of all, the crew regulation. At this point in time, it is required that each vessel using the River Scheldt has to have at least 2 people on board of the ship, meaning a captain and a sailor. Next to that, mooring infrastructure. I think there are only 8 passenger jetties that the water bus is using right now, over a distance, I think, of 18 kilometers, which is it's a quite big distance, but there's not a lot of jetties, of course. So this might also be something to look into. Capacity, you need capacity. Do you focus on transporting people? Do you focus on transporting people with bikes, less bikes, more bikes, no bikes? These are all questions that need to be answered. And of course, the cost. Again, this crew regulation, if you need 1 skipper and a sailor, that's an enormous overhead, an enormous OPEX. So cost is always a pain point. Maybe if the government helps, we can reduce these costs, but that is something that we learned as one of the biggest constraints next to the crew regulation. At GNA, we talked to Captain Bart van Meensel. and we just had an open discussion on our business proposal, which I will talk about to conclude this presentation. And we asked if it was possible to use one skipper for smaller boats. And he said that actually in the royal decree, it states that you can use one skipper if you don't exceed a vessel that can take 12 passengers at a time. Next to that, you can only operate south of the Rooiersluis. So as of Rooiersluis all the way down to Hemixem, you can use one skipper along the river Scheldt. The reason why is because as of Rooiersluis, there is a possibility of interference with seagoing vessels. And of course, this is a safety constraint, so that's why it's not possible to do it this way. But we thought that maybe you can use smaller boats up until Rooiersluis and then connect via the water bus to go, let's say, to Lilo or Callot. That's a possibility. We talked to Thomas Gerets from MDK and Sintra in Vlaanderen. At Sintra in Vlaanderen, we want to have an idea of what it takes to become a sailor. What it takes to become a sailor, what are the courses that you have to take in order to get licensed. We learned that there are 3 levels. There's a safety level, an operational level, and a managerial level. Safety level is basic safety training, firefighting drills. Operational is more mooring of the vessel, fastening the ropes, and then managerial level is, of course, being a skipper, managing the vessel. And we learned that the new directive of January 2022, I don't know if all of you are aware of this, states that it's much more difficult, or makes it much more difficult for people from outside of the maritime industry to make a shift in their career and become a sailor or a skipper. The new regulation, how can I explain it in the right way? The new regulation actually gives pupils an education of 9 months, earning them up to 90 navigation days, but this leaves them just between safety and operational level. So to become a licensed sailor, you need to have additional training to become a licensed sailor or to operate on a vessel. Mind you as well that the people that the water bus, or the licensed people that the water bus requires, are also heavily sought after in the inland waterways industry. So there's an enormous competition from the commercial side as well. Together with MDK, we had again an open discussion to see what their view is on the water transportation system in Antwerp. And we learned that they, together with Vlaamse Waterweg, if I'm not mistaken, that they are setting up a body, an organization to help private owners, business owners with their business case. They received multiple questions on the regulations of a water transportation system on the River Scheldt, what to do, what is necessary, and decided to bond together and help private organizations and private owners with their business case. So this is actually a very interesting idea to further follow up. And of course, we had a meeting with the CMB Tech as well. One of the challenges MCA gave us was how can we make shipping more sustainable, people transportation shipping more sustainable. And we of course thought of CMB Tech because it's an Antwerp-based company. And we asked one of their engineers if hydrogen could be a solution for people transportation. And we quickly realized that hydrogen is not the perfect source of energy because hydrogen needs a lot of storage space in the vessel. And we think that we have to go to smaller vessels, so hydrogen would take up too much space, so we would lose our competitive advantage with less capacity. However, they told us that a dual fuel engine might be the best solution as of now, where you use electricity inside the city limits and then a fossil fuel combustion engine outside of the city. Let's say, for example, after Kruijbeke, where you can use then a fossil fuel, the fossil fuel option. We also asked for the future what his idea was for these small vessels, and he told us that battery-operated vessels would be the best solution. But then the question arises: what do we do with infrastructure? Do we load these batteries at night when the ships or the vessels aren't operative, or do we use disposable batteries where we use batteries or batteries at the different jetties? We just dispose them, put them in the charger, and take a fully laden battery to go to the next location. So these are some are constraints, some are perspectives for the future. But this is what we learned through our qualitative research. And based on this, we came to the idea of some areas to exploit, maybe in Antwerp, or to explore, maybe in Antwerp, sorry. So here we have the Roorsluis. So this means that below the Roorsluis, we can actually do what we want using one skipper. But we also thought of expanding, let's say, the playing fields across Mexico-Brug. We have a lot of developments here being constructed right now. A lot of apartment buildings are being constructed there, so there can be a new market. We can even go as far as to Merksem, to het Sportpaleis, to facilitate people there. And of course, again, if possible, using as right now a dual fuel engine. But the idea is to go in a sustainable way going forward. Now I'd like to give the word back to Naeem, who will conclude the presentation with the proposal and recommendations.
Okay, so now the study was done, the comparison was done, and then we deduced a certain, after our understanding the whole scenarios, the regulations, because there are lots of restrictions and lots of impediments. So, but we came to a proposal, and then it's just as a part of a study, we gave it out, and then it's open to explore and open for discussion and of course collaborations. So what we propose, that a very important part here is that aligning with the SDG number 17, that it's always with partnership that we can achieve a lot of things. Individual person or individual organization cannot handle this kind of complicated issues, or let's say solutions. So it is better to work, and then it's a very good way to move forward, to have a strong foundation with public and private entities working together to come up to a solution. So that would be the base of this strategy. And then we look into, like Ashil said, we look into the geographical extension, not only on the north-south, but also on the east-west side, to explore jetty locations, which is the next strategy to consolidate. MDK already said that there are certain, initiatives ongoing to consolidate inventory of available jetty locations. So we can again look into the options, which I think so. Vlaamse Waterweg is going to touch again the spots where additional jetties can be installed. So that is again a very good sign that to move forward to identify those. And then in the end, like Professor Thierry said, that we need to understand the total cost of any mode of transport. And with the current ITF, which was released last in June, and also with the EU directives, more modal split, sustainable and accessible mode of transport is what is the focus of current governments. So we need to understand what is the cost. So we need to internalize all the external costs of fueling, the distance travel, cycling, or the water transportation. So that is what, and if we could develop a framework wherein people can be incentivized through tax reforms as part of their contribution to sustainability and less emissions to the city, that would be very ideal. But again, like I said, it's up for discussions and lots of discussions. Okay, so recommendation for the further future research, like we discussed with CMB, at the current scenario with the available infrastructure, it's for us it's to look at availability of power to charge the batteries at all locations. This is not only, but we are focusing on water transport, but it can be across all transportations. And also like I said, it's also the availability and cost, because we need to understand, we need to internalize all the external costs with compared to diesel operation. And of course, the mechanisms in line with their contribution, or standalone mechanisms can be developed. Which information is shorter, but yeah, this was a summary of what we could come up with. That we had
time for
6 weeks. We had 6 weeks to do our master. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Well, maybe a quick applause for those guys. Just wanted to add something there. Many of you might have followed the Thesis of the Year award from Flows magazine, where Anne-Sophie Aubry received the first prize on the legal challenges regarding autonomous shipping in inland waters. It might also give some food for thought on how we could transfer those ideas and thoughts of this thesis combined to also a more operational people or person transport of the guys of the University of Antwerp. Thank you very much for that. I'm very glad that the chairman of the steering committee and some of the members that were formed between MOA, Vlaamse Waterweg, and MDK in Flemish government are present here, and that they also want to share some of their thoughts on what they're doing, because I think when a year and a half ago, and when we start discussing with Thierry and also with everyone that's sitting around here on the front row, also, yeah, what is the Flemish government thinking of what's next after the water bus, for instance? And it's good to see that in the interactions that we had, both from our side, from university side, but also from people that want to really go and build up a business there, that some things are moving there. And I think the first thing is, Stijn, you're gonna tell us something about what you see on the possible pickup sites.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stijn Bosmans, and I'm working for the Flemish Waterways. Like Bart told us, MCA has asked us to give a short overview of the mooring facilities on the River Scheldt and also on the River Rupel. Like most people know, Flemish Waterway is resorting under Minister of Mobility and Public Works. Our operating area is the Flemish part of Belgium and all the inland navigation waterways which we are managing. Our main tasks are maintenance and development of the waterways network and its assets, stimulating transport of water management, and also facilitate and stimulate other functions. Now to the topic of today, people transport on River Scheldt, Rupel in the region of Antwerp, so inventory of the mooring facilities. So I will give a short overview from upstream to downstream, and also the current facilities, but also possible future facilities. The future facilities are not necessarily concrete, and also it can put ideas from public, but also from private initiators. In this overview, I will make abstraction of the relevance in concept of mobility and also order of magnitude of shared use, because as example, there are some ferries which every half hour get over it. In that half hour, there is possible a shared use of the facilities, but yeah, one actor, two actors, three actors, it's not clear at this moment. And also I make abstraction of the permits for future facilities, the building, environmental, nautical, and cost, and so on. So the Rupel and the Sea Scheldt, upper and the upper and lower Sea Scheldt, and like already told, it's tide dependent river, so especially for people transport, floating facilities are a must. So tidal difference is 5 up to 6 meters, so it's necessary. Let's start at the River Rupel. Maybe it's too small. But on the upstream part, number one, there is a future unloading facility, but it's not suitable for people transport. Then we come to number two. That's the Schorre area, known as the site of the Marlin. And the province of Antwerp have launched several ideas to connect that area via water, but at this moment it's not concrete, but there's a possibility to create our facility. Then we come to at the River Rubel, there are two ferries, Klein Willebroek Boom and Scheldt. That's number 3, 7, 8, and 9. And that's jetties for vessels about length 15 meters and passengers capacity of 40 people with bike. It's possible to use that facility, but of course it's priority to the public ferry. And like I told, every half hour there is they get over it from the left to the right riverbank. Then also I put number 3 between brackets because at that point there is also public floating jetting for passenger ships in general. So that part is for sure to use by people transport. Then we come to 4, 5, 6. The potential locations for mooring facilities. I put 4 between brackets because there is the idea to create their water connected site to transporting goods to people transport is not ideal. Then we come to the sea Scheldt from Thames to the river mouth of Rubel. 24, 28, there are unloading facilities by factories or companies, not suitable, but I say not suitable, but maybe it's well because at the end of the beginning of River Kai, it's maybe technical possible to create something, but at this moment it's not the case. Then 25, we have the marina of Thames. It's a light infrastructure, so no large vessels possible, and we have to make arrangements with the marina. Then 26, we have the public floating jetty for passenger ships, so people transport is possible. But at the touristic season, it's very busy, so good arrangements with the different actors is necessary. Then 27, we have the Wilford Quay. Future floating jetty is possible, but it's at this moment there's no floating jetty. But and it's also a technical challenge, but it's possible. Then we come to 30. That's a public floating jetty for inland shipping, especially for goods, transporting goods. And for vessels which take some rest to wait on the right tide or to take a rest about their rest times. On the bank side of the jetty, there's a possibility to use that for people transport, but there is no car parking in the neighborhood. Then 31, there's a yacht club. In my opinion, it's not suitable. It's very light infrastructure. Then we come to the municipal jetty, the city of. At this moment, it's not suitable, but maybe there is some possibilities to create there or something new. Then 33, there is a project in development. Which has a topic on people transport, and it's a private initiator, but it's not at this moment. It's not concrete, but they're still working on it. Then 34, there is the ferry jetty of the ferry Rubelmonde Windam. It's a touristic ferry. It is so only from April till October. And again, priority to the ferry arrangements to make with the ferry operator, but it's possible to use that at those facilities. And again, it's floating jettings approximately 10-15 meters. Uh, 36. Then we have again marina, no large vessels. Again, arrangements to make with the yacht club. Usually no place. I think 37. It's a bit tolerant. It's an organization which is taking the preservation of maritime heritage, and it's possible to use that, but with arrangements with the organization, and also usually no place. Then 10, 11, it's on the right riverbank. It's private jetties, not suitable, not working. And then 11, that's an old non-floating jetty of Flemish Waterway. Not usable at this moment, but in the future there's maybe a new floating jetty possible, and there's also parking in the neighborhood. Then the part, the sea Scheldt from Rupel to Antwerp, here to the Kennedy Tunnel. Point team, it's a site of XP, which is a former company site, factory site. But there's a new development of residential area, so it's a potential location for a floating jetty. At this moment, there is no for vessels. Then 15 and 39, there are at this part there are two ferries of NDK. Basel Eemshaven and Kruijbeek Hoofdbroek. So I put 15 and 39 together because there is a shared use of the ferry and the water bus. And with the operators, there is the arrangement that there is no place for other users. Then we have a whole list of unloading facilities, but at this moment, there's not quay walls which are transporting goods and so on. So at this moment, not suitable for people transport. But again, maybe in the future there is for Umicore, like homework transportation. There's some possible, but there is a need to creating some floating facilities. Then 22, 38. Again, ferry jetties, Hoofdbroek and Basel. No water bus at this site, but so priority to the ferry, and there is some possible to use those facilities, but you have to make arrangements with the ferry operator. Then 43 has a new floating jetty planned by Belgian Defense, but no option to use that. Then 46, yeah, there is a future jetty for the water bus. There is from the Zwijndrecht, from the city of Zwijndrecht, which gonna build it. And again, it's maybe possible to use it, but you have to make arrangements with the water bus. Then yeah, 64. It's an old jetty of XPP, but it's now, I think, site of MCA, and there's a future plan to create a floating jetty, I suppose.
Depends on the city
Okay.
side.
Again, 65, yeah, 48. It's again unloading facilities is petroleum south. This is usable for people transport. Then yeah, 47 is all the Cayman floating and also not suitable for people transport. Then the sea Scheldt near Antwerp. Yeah, 66. We have the private jetty of CMA, but they told me that they will be replaced to the port of Antwerp. Then 56, 57, that's a downstream port. Unloading facilities, it's not 58 is the home port of DMA and also operator of the water bus, arrangement to make with DMA. Then we get to upstream port, the 67, there's a Scheldt upstream stay plan, not suitable at this moment. Future floating mooring facilities, maybe possible. It's maybe in the plan of the Antwerp City Port. I don't know, but then we have the jetty of Stijn Plan is the main hub of the water bus, and also 2 ferries. No place for other user, exceptional touch and go. Right, Wenders? Then 69, we have the new cruise terminal, sea and river cruises, arrangements to make with the Antwerp City Port, because they do from all the Scheldt, the bird management. Then 70, there's a small floating jetty, but it's only for Bravo, boatmen, and emergency service like police and fire services. And on 71, it's a non-floating mooring facility for inland navigation. It's a waiting place for the lock of the Royer lock, but it's not suitable for people transport. Then 50, that's on the left river bank. It's not suitable because the marshes are too wide. Technically, is everything possible, but difficult to get something there. Then 51, we have a lot of mooring facilities of Pleasure Federation and Sea Scout and so on. This moment not suitable. Then 52, we have the Boudewijn Kill. Maybe there are some ideas to create there some floating jetty, but again, for all facilities great at Antwerp, it's always a precondition that there is enough attention for the turning area for the sea cruises, because that's at this moment an issue. Then 53, we have the public floating jetty at St. Anneke. The upstream part is preserved for the water bus, but the other part is suitable for people transport. I'm wrong. 53 is the public floating jetty of the home port of the vessels of DHB Vlot, and there are two ferries at this moment, and without extension of adaptation, there is no more possibility to create something extra for people transport. Then 54, we have the floating jetty of the marina. I suppose no large vessels, arrangements to make with the marina. I think Patrick, right, Patrick? Then 55, then we come up to the public floating jetty at St. Anneke, and upstream 30 meter is reserved for the water bus. The other part is possible for passenger and pleasure ships according to mooring regulation. So people transport is possible. Then we go to the border, so from Antwerp to the border. We have 59. That's the floating jetty for the water bus, arrangements to make with the operator of the water bus. It's possible, but this moment, normally we have we get some questions from passengers companies, but for this jetty, I've never get some questions to get there, but it's possible, I suppose. 72, it's a planned future jetty for the water bus upstream Van Kouwelaert lock. At this moment, there is not the building permit is there, but there is still some discussion which organization will build those facilities. Then we have 60, 62. It's some it's like Ineos, and so that's not so suitable for people. And 61, we have the floating jetty for the Waterweg at Liefkeshoek. Again, arrangements to make with the operator. And upstream that jetty, there is also the jetty of the towing. Maybe there is some arrangement to make with them, but I think it's already filled with all their vessels. Then 73, we have our public floating facility, the jetty of Lillo. A part is preserved for the Waterweg, and again, the other part is suitable for other people transport. There are a lot of other actors available, like in the pilot vessels and so on. But at this moment, it's possible to use. 63, we have the non-floating mooring facility at Toul. Very poor condition at this moment, not so good, but there are future plans to create a new floating mooring jetty. So in the future, there is a ferry or what is possible. I don't know. It's a question, but those plans are there because become Toul will remain, and to create a new dock. That is some of the preconditions that there will be the village of Toul will be connected by. That's my presentation.
Remember, if you're going to have a drink afterwards, you will be examined on every of those pickup spots. When we were thinking about what would be a possibility, we came to about 20, 25 possible locations. No, Philippe, how many pickup places you identified? I think about around 30.
I know them all. I know all the places, and I know all the places that we can use.
You never said 70 or plus.
No.
And we have 6.7 kilometers of quay here at the city of Antwerp. So there are possibilities at least to do so. It will cost time, it will cost money, it will cost permits, and you have to balance what's economically viable, relevant, and that means that you have to go in interaction with both city and privates, I think, to do something about it. One more thing for the people at home, you can ask questions afterwards. We have limited time for Q&A. Just put them in the chat, and my dear colleagues will tell which one could be answered directly. Thomas, can I ask you something some time of your life to tell something about the meeting?
Take some time out of your lives to talk about the institutional landscape and the different kind of public actors that are involved in the people transport on the river Scheldt. And I think it's also important that you get a picture of who we are, who MDK is, and why we are involved in this. So MDK stands for the Agency for Maritime and Coastal Services. We're part of the Flemish government. More specifically, we're part of the policy area of mobility and public works, just like Vlaamse Waterweg. Here you can see that more in detail. So we're a part of the mobility and public works of Vlaamse Waterweg, but also other actors involved in mobility, such as Landis, for example, who in the Antwerp area is involved in large mobility and infrastructure works. So there's quite a lot of actors, and some of those, well, quite a lot actually, will be returning when we talk more specifically about transport on the river Scheldt. So who are we? What are we responsible for? We're an agency that's responsible for the coastal area in general and access to our ports. So we ensure safety of the maritime zone, support optimal cooperation across the nautical chains. So that means ships coming from sea that have to get to the ports are guided by us. There are also pilots who make sure that they are taken into port safely. So that is one of the large missions that we have. We also try to contribute to the economic development of the coastal zone and the Flemish ports. More on that in a minute. And we provide transport over water for the citizens of Flanders. That is a new task, well, quite a new task. Since 2020, the decision was made to pool all the responsibility for transport over water, well, public transport over water, with MDK. Although we did have some ferries already, but more on that in a minute. What we try to do with our reliable service, innovation, expertise, and cooperation should make us the ultimate maritime government partner. I think a lot of those kind of maybe buzzwords, but kind of a lot of those are returning here. We're talking about innovation, technologies available in the markets. We try to pool private and public actors, so we cooperate, and we try to get expertise from all those partners in one place, so that we can go get better decision making, better policy in the future, and that it can benefit both private companies and society as well. The MDK itself is split in a number of departments. I'm part of the general staff, so we're more closely linked to the political side and the policy making. Then there's the coastal division, and that is responsible for the protection of the coasts in Flanders by making it more safe against the possible more natural disasters that could happen at sea, for example. Floodings, protecting against those, also quite large infrastructure works. And then there's the shipping assistance division that across the whole nautical chains has a lot of radar towers and through dispatching and guiding ships via via audio. They try to make sure that ships can go safely to, from and to the Flemish ports. Pilotage is also a part of that. That is when people from our agency assist ships in coming to the harbors, to the seaports. Those are people that have exceptional skill and know-how of the terrain, of course, a very specific local expertise. And another, the last agency that we have is Fleet, which manages and maintains ships that can be used by partners or by clients. So it's actually the official shipping company of the government or the Flemish government. So that brings us back to the three main tasks. So as I said, the bringing people across the water is something quite new for us. So we haven't been into the whole mobility aspect that long. Since 2020, we've been responsible for uniting all those initiatives, and by putting everything in with one actor, it makes it easier for making policy decisions and for making a more of a coherent policy. Before we were responsible for public transport over water, the agency Fleet already had a number of ferry services. So two at the coast, two in Ghent that can transport cars as well, and three in the Antwerp area. Since becoming the agency responsible for public transport over water, we have also took over the water bus at the start of 2021 from the port of Antwerp-Rouge. And we are in the ongoing process of also taking over some smaller ferry services from Vlaamse Waterweg. We already took over two in Ghent, earlier this year, and the rest will follow normally in 2023. So that brings us to public transport on the river Scheldt itself. So we are responsible for, we have 3 ferries, St. Anna, Kerbeke, Hoboken, and Bart Huybrechts, and there's also the Waterweg. The 3 ferries are quite consistent in their usage. I think in 2019, they transported 1.2 million people across the river. And 2020, that fell to 0.8 million, but that's of course partly due to COVID. And we see that in 2021, it's already bounced back to the 1 million mark. So it's quite a steady service that's provided there. The Waterbus is quite new, only started in 2017, but we see remarkable growth in numbers. Of course, 2020 again is quite the exception with COVID again. But what do those numbers tell us? That there is definitely a demand for it, although maybe that demand would not have been that clear at the start. Just like you said, sometimes you have to make sure that there is a supply before you can see how much it impacts people. The amount of passengers has grown throughout the years, which shows us that blue highway that we have over there has quite some potential. And that potential has not stayed with just the passengers and with the government side, but private actors have also been coming to us to ask questions if they can start initiatives. What are the legislation surrounding that? What's the policy? And for all those things, we need to get together a lot of other actors, because we're not the only ones involved in transport on the river. So we're responsible for public transport, which already limits us to a certain part of transport. And then there's also other actors like the Vlaamse Waterweg, who is like the manager of the waterways in most of Flanders, and is responsible for infrastructure. In the past, a lot of initiatives that are done on or around the water. The Vlaamse Waterweg gives permits to do those activities or licenses to make use of existing infrastructure. There's also the Afdeling Maritime Toegang, so the Maritime Access Department, that has more of a say in the management of the waterways between the ports and the sea. So in the upper parts, the more northern part of Antwerp, they come into play as well. There's also the GNA, so the Joint Nautical Agency Administration Authority. Yeah, thanks. And that's a cross-border collaboration between the Belgian and the Dutch government to ensure safe passage for ships between the ports and the sea. So very much in line with what MDK also does for aside from the transport over water. And then another very important actor is the department itself, so the Mobility and Public Works. They are responsible for legislation and policy, for creating policy. So they're definitely not to be underestimated as an important actor in this whole story. So of course you can imagine when we get questions as MDK around what kind of private initiatives are allowed on the river. Those are not questions that we alone can answer, because first of all, the whole mobility question is something very intricate, as there is also also mobility regions, where mobility is looked at from an integrated approach. So that alone makes it difficult for us to be the only actor to decide all those kinds of things. But most of those actors that are in the areas are also part of the Vlaamse Waterweg departments, are all also represented in those institutions. But to better make sure that we can provide an answer to some of those questions and to avoid situations where questions end up with NBK and then we just say, sorry, that is not our policy area. We can't decide on those things. There's actually none of those actors that have a final or full say in any of those matters because it's quite a fragmented landscape of responsibilities, but also a very complex matter of questions that we get. And that's why we decided to avoid that kind of asking one actor, getting then having to ask the question to another because nobody knows who to ask. To avoid that, we decided to create a joint project with all those public partners to tackle any issues or to better create a vision together with all those public actors. One of the things we started was for the region of Antwerp, so the Scheldt, like Stijn has presented, to map the infrastructure that's available and to kind of do an evaluation of what is available, what is actually usable, what might be usable in the future. And another important part is that we have all those actors at the table, but we also need input from the private sector to know what are your questions, what would you like to see, what are you concerned about? So in general, what can we do for you? Because we cannot write legislation or policy just from our side. We need those kinds of discussions. We need to know what the questions are and how we can help you and how we can help each other. And I think that's the main message. Okay.
Okay, I think that's reach out for everyone in this session. Say, okay, how are we going to tackle that? So that's also the reason why we organized this session, just to give some insight on what's going on, so that everyone can say, I'm involved, I want to be involved, I don't want to be involved, I have an idea, I have a solution, and that not everyone is knocking on the same door twice, but that we also get some structure in there, and that we also not get conflicted in a way that if one private party asks to the government, yes, I want that he's immediately condemned to say, yeah, it's only in your benefit, but he might also be asking things in benefit for all. And that would be, I think, one challenge that I would like to take up with you guys in the next round. And I think there are a lot of private actors here in this room that feel the same thing. Alex has a question.
Yes, I'd like to start with a question. Team Professor Vanelslander, when you looked at Rotterdam, Dubai, and Istanbul, what was the financial viability of these water taxis, water buses? Because I see, you know, how much the tickets cost, and this is all very nice, and you can make a projection on what the cost is in terms of passengers. Mm-hmm. By the way, when you say that this is the cheapest transport mode, I concur when the ship is full. When the ship is empty, it's a very, very costly exercise. Mm-hmm. What we see with the waterbus, and I don't know if there's any people here in the room from the waterbus, well, then you can probably answer the question that I will ask. This boom we see in the summer period is very much linked to people that have free time on their hands, and it's not really people that are avoiding the car to commute. So many questions, but maybe start with the first one. How are the projects in other cities financed? Is this a profitable business model? Do they get subsidies from the government? How does that work?
Maybe one?
Yeah. Okay, I'll take an example of Dubai. It's very simple because it's government owned. So all the questions on subsidies, profitable, non-profitable, it's irrelevant for them because it's government owned. They're just providing as a service. They govern all the regulations. They govern all the fees. They own the boats. They own everything. In Turkey, like my friend Akif said, it's very open competition. You have government taxis which are there operated. You have private entities who operate. It's a free market. As long as you conform to a particular set of regulations given by the government, you follow, the market is open and you can get a license.
Anybody can start and ask for a license.
Yeah, then, of course, like I said, there are certain regulations as to which you have to follow. You need to have a license to drive the boat itself. You need to have a commercial registration. You need to have your boat, which complies to particular, let's say, a set of regulations in nautical or to be the water, like how to say, sailability, ship stability. You have seagoing, there are lots of other things which they take into account. All of this is there. Then you are operated. There is no restriction on how to say a number of boats which can operate. Like, for example, okay, they're not restricting, only 50 boats can operate in this area, only 100 boats can operate in that area. No, it's an open market. As long as you are operating there, it's there.
And you speak to the owners of these companies?
Okay, I spoke to people in Dubai. That was the only personal contact I had because I also worked in that region. So I know certain people in that road and transport authority. So I spoke to them. So that is how I got the information. Of course, in Turkey, we were not able to get to the people. We did reach out. It's not that we didn't reach out, but we didn't get the response. The time frame of our master, because we are not research fundamental. We are management fundamental. So the time frame of our research is only 6 weeks. So we had time frame of 6 weeks to come up with to look at this problem and to come up with a, let's say, acceptable solution.
And if I'm not mistaken, in Rotterdam, there are a lot of pilots that work as pilots,
Yes,
and as a pastime, they buy a boat together and just operate it. And it's also pretty viable business, I believe.
And most pilots as well are old or retired captains from seagoing vessels. So they have a pool of pilots that they can use. And I do know that the city of Rotterdam gives subsidies to these companies. So there is and financial part of your question, there are subsidies given to them.
In Turkey, there are no subsidies.
It's one of them belongs to municipality, so it's been like 100% subsidized. But those other two private companies are like privately owned and run. We don't see any financial information about like how are their revenues, incomes, and costs, and the thing we don't have.
We have no idea of operational costs of running the system.
But maybe we have the full discussion maybe afterwards with the drink, because otherwise it will take us longer. Maybe we will don't have any more time. There was one question about the water bus. Maybe just go directly in the summertime.
Yeah, or there's the same a little bit as the land. With the bus and trams, there are some times that they're completely full, no booked, and sometimes they're also driving empty. And that's what we're facing too, of course. But what we see is the demand is getting bigger and bigger, especially for the port. And that we are waiting for that for the government to have a good cooperation with them, and we have a good cooperation with them, but we have to increase. Get more boats and more people, but that's the point. The captains, the from captains and
But broadly speaking, today, how much % of your cost needs to be subsidized in order to make it viable? 50%, 70%?
I think it's more than 60%.
More than 60%.
But that's saying the land is 100%.
Yeah.
Public transport costs more than nothing.
Not a full 100%, but it's close. Okay, other questions maybe?
I have a question. Thank you to all the speakers for what for me was really inspiring, because I don't know the sector that well. What is not clear to me is, where is this session? What is the process that you want to be using? So I understand today is to say we want to build the ecosystem. We want to see who wants to play a part in it. But what is the process, and where do you want that process to go?
Well, the thing is, we're not a consulting company as MCA. We try to bring people together. What we want to hear from you is, how do you want to get involved? Do you want to get involved, and with what do you want? What are the ideas, and how do we put people on the table? I have an idea, but that's just an idea, that it might not be that bad to put 5, 6, 7 people here from government side, a few people from the private side together and say, okay, what kind of ambition should we go for? What's achievable, yes or no? Because if we don't set some kind of ambition, then we cannot organize everything underneath it, and everyone will do different things. That would be my suggestion, but that's only me from a personal level. And from that way on, you can have other things. Yeah, how on a technological point of view is are we going to buy our boats each one wherever we want? Are we just going to give some guidelines? Or we're going to do say, yeah, scale and scope is interesting also for infrastructure, for vessels, for whatever, for technology, for innovation? Do we need subsidies for that? That's a thing that also depends on what goals you set for yourself. Where are we in technology now? Where do we want to go? And when do we want to go there? That would be my first thing, and putting people together. Also for pilots. I think my main takeaway, and we're rather oriented to doing stuff. And I know that there are people say, yeah, but if we want to do stuff, we also need to interact with a few people. Yeah, let's put those people together. Set up a pilot. If we want to have 5 or 6 pickup places and want to say, okay, open it up, and for the next 3 years, people can have some kind of intermediate license or whatever that they can act on it and try it with some safety level. Let's do that. That might be an issue. It's not for us to determine where we want to go. It's to see for the group, both government, private, where can we go, and who want to put some time in it and effort in it to go there and build their own business plan, or just out of general interest, say, okay, I want to contribute to that. That's what they call ecosystem. That's what they call co-creation, buzzword as well. But we're not going to define what to do, because otherwise we would be consultants. I would have to talk to Alex that I would have another job and not be involved with everything that has to do with MCA in itself. If there's something necessary, we need capacity, we need whatever, we will sort it out and see that there's capacity to research things. We have your universities on board, we have a government here sitting here, we can ask the questions, and we will be privileged to ask your questions and relay it to them and see with who that we can sit together.
We are not in the end, we are the movers and shakers. We're not the people who will in the end do these things. But we, as we did here, we got 3 students, we got Thierry. He said, well, what's the landscape? Show us. And you get, a fresh insight. It's not 40-year-old, 50-year-olds saying, well, we did this 10 years ago, did not work. No, they came in with a complete naivete and said, of course, water taxes, why not? And got other people inspired as well. And it starts moving things forward. I think what's very important in what we're trying to do here is to say there is new technology, there is a new requirement, which makes that we can look at a new opportunity. The only thing is that needs to start from, I would say, a reasonably tabula rasa. To not say, well, we've done this before 10 years ago and it turned out to be a water bus and we will try the water bus again. No, well, that had its problems. Maybe, kind of singular pods shipping one person around, maybe a solution. Maybe, we don't know. But again, that's something where I think, again, a set of fresh minds need to start working with the government, with the industry, and say, well, what is possible?
I think there are people here in the audience that are working on this for how many years? 20, something like that. I think the water bus is a good example that something can come out of this kind of exercises. But the fact that there are a lot of people in this room also following online means that there is some interest. There are also new actors, new technologies, new people involved. Let's see what this brings. I hope this gives some kind of answer to your question. And by doing that, Deepak spoiled my surprise as a surprise because he had some small announcements to make to sum up. The only thing that I would like to mention before Deepak going to have a small drink is get into contact with us, contact each other. You have a network experience that you can have following this session. And like we tend to say it in MCA, all hands on deck, and let's go for it.
Coordinates, just in case you need them. This is part of what we do as MCA community. So we're trying to bring people together on different challenges and try to move towards action. And for me, kind of inspiring students and getting students to actually move into that field is very important. So yeah, 2 of the 3 events that we're doing right now are student inspiration sessions. are meant to actually show talents that there is need for innovative and creative ideas within the maritime sector as well. We're doing a session in October on cybersecurity and maritime cybersecurity. Surprisingly, a very untouched subject, but we're very much looking at moving students towards that. The same October to 25th, we're launching a maritime cybersecurity center for Belgium. Getting the industry together to actually start looking at creating a transparent and neutral entity where every company can come to with its cybersecurity needs. And then the 8th of November, together with the Antwerp Maritime Academy, we're doing a student inspiration session on crew well-being, looking at, again, the same kind of digital technologies that exist on land, and what can that do for people on ships as well. So again, I hope you found ideas here. Again, the most important part comes now, which is to go out and actually talk to the other people in the room. Try to find somebody you don't know and just ask the question, what inspires you on people transport? And you'll most probably make new friends and come up with new ideas, which is very important. But don't forget, yes, you got triggered. Now the most important part is, what are you going to do with this? The moment you feel that you have something to contribute, get in touch with us. We are looking to get that momentum going. And we need everybody on board to get that done. Again, a short pitch for ourselves. MCA community, you're seeing what we're doing. I hope you like what we're doing. Do become a member. Very democratic. There's hardly, I mean, it's good value for money. But yeah, we need people to actually come and join the community and actually also take part, get inspired, take hold of some concrete actions and start doing things.
Okay, and then finalize also takeaways, what you don't like from this kind of events or sessions. It's too long, it's too dull, whatever. If you say that, yeah, say also what you are yourself are going to contribute next time, so it becomes more interesting even. And I would like to thank all my speakers. Remain seated for just 1 minute after this session. I would like to thank everyone who's online. And now I would like to invite you to go over there and throat is getting sour, so everyone fill it up with some. Thank you very much.